It is now possible to build full stack applications using just Expo Router and Prisma. With Expo, it's easier than ever to create and deploy full stack applications, and Prisma, they've been cooking like crazy. We all know and love the Prisma ORM. It makes working with your database a breeze. But in case you missed it, Prisma now offers a fully managed Postgres database with a very generous free tier. That means no more wasting time hunting down a database provider. Just click connect and go. Prisma also has this really nice Prisma Studio, a beautiful UI that lets you interact with your database right from the browser. Super useful during development and also great for quick updates in production. And here's the game changer. Prisma Accelerate, it's a fully managed global connection pool and caching layer, and it makes your application fast and more scalable out of the box. In today's video, we're going to put all these tools together to build a full stack to-do application using Expo Router, Prisma ORM, Prisma's new fully managed Postgres database, and Accelerate features. And at the end, I'll show you how to deploy everything using EAS Hosting. So let's dive in. Quick heads up, if you are serious about building scalable applications and want to become the mobile expert your team relies on, I'm excited to share that everything at codewithbeto.dev is now available with lifetime access. That means all my courses, premium resources, private GitHub repos, one payment, yours forever. And right now, there's a limited time 20% discount or 30% off for teams. Check it out at codewithbeto.dev. I'm gonna leave the link in the description. Now let's get back to the video. If you want to follow along with me, guys, you're gonna need to have an Expo account. If you don't have one already, just go to expo.dev and create yours. This video is not sponsored by Prisma, but if you want to use my link down here, I might get a t-shirt from Prisma, so that'd be cool. Please go ahead and use that link to create an account. I already have mine, so if I go ahead and press login, this is going to take me to my personal workspace. So this is how the workspace looks like. I already have 2 projects, as you can see here. So let's go ahead and create a new one for this video. I'm going to call this one To-Do app. So we're going to be using the Prisma managed Postgres database with Accelerate, which, like I said at the beginning, it's a connection pooling and global caching. So just by pressing the get started, we're going to have a new Postgres database with Accelerate features. Next, let's choose the region. In my case, I'm going to choose US East Virginia and create project. All right, and that's basically it, guys. They provide a quick start project, but in our case, we're going to create our own Expo project, so you can select existing project. Copy this database URL. Be careful, guys, don't share this with anyone. This is actually an environment variable that we need to hide, right? And just share with your team. Okay, so this is basically all we need from Prisma at the moment. Before we dive into the code, remember that this project is going to be available at the projects at codewithbeto.dev, guys, completely for free, available for you in case you want to reference anything. Is going to be here. Now that we have our Prisma account with our project created, let's go ahead and create a new Expo project. I'm going to use Bun to create my Expo app, and I'm going to call it Expo Prisma To-Do app. This is going to use the default template, which comes with Expo Router and allows us to use API routes. Now I'm going to cd into my project and open this in Cursor. I'm going to run npx expo start just to make sure that everything is working fine. This is using Expo Go, and I'll press I to open this on my simulator. Awesome, and the app is working fine. So I'm going to stop the server. And the next thing that I want to do is going to be create a new .env file. In this .env file, I'm going to add my database URL. And by the way, you might be using, for example, a .env.local file. This is completely valid for Expo applications, but actually Prisma is going to throw an error if you're using this .env.local. You have to name it .env. So what you can do is actually just duplicate the same variable in both in case you want to keep these two. Again, guys, you want to be careful with these files. So let's close this so that no one else can see my API key. And let's go to the git ignore and let's ignore the .env file that we just created so that we don't send that to GitHub by accident. Now let's install Prisma with Accelerate. So I'm gonna say bun install add Prisma /extension accelerate. This is the only dependency that we need. Okay, so let's close the terminal for now. And I'm going to go to my Explorer and let's create a new folder called Prisma, and inside this folder, let's create our schema. Okay, so let's hit enter. Let's define the database source. We're using PostgreSQL, and then we are taking the URL from the environment. Now down here, let's define the client. You can now specify the output of your Prisma client. And what I'm doing here is just specifying that I want Prisma to create all my client code inside a generated folder and then just client. this is going to create this folder inside this Prisma folder, because inside of this Prisma folder, we have the schema. That's why it's going to create it inside of it. That's all the configuration that we need. Now we can start creating our models. So I'm going to create a to-do model, and I think this should be enough. It has an ID by default, a title, completed, created at, and updated at. That looks good to me. After we set up the database, we can run npx prisma migrate dev. So let's copy this command, put it in here, and hit enter. If you notice, Prisma is loading the variables from the .env file, like I said before. Now it's asking me for the name of this migration. So I'm going to just call it init. And the migration was applied correctly. And our database now is in sync with our schema. So if I close the terminal on the left, we can inspect that now we have two folders, the generated client, and this is all the code that Prisma needs basically. So we don't really need to pay attention to that, that's generated. And then we also have the history of migrations. We only have one, this is the first one called init. Now let's generate the Prisma client for Accelerate. I'm going to copy this command and paste this npx prisma generate, no engine. All right, and now we're good to start importing the Prisma client. So let's copy this example from the Prisma website. So back to our application, the default template comes with these tabs, layout, and the not found screen, right? Now this is going to be a full stack application using Expo Router API routes. So let's go ahead and create a new folder that is going to contain basically our API, aka our backend. And I'm going to create my first API called Todo. In order for Expo Router to know that this is an API, I'm going to say plus API and then .ts. So let's paste the import from Prisma client with Accelerate. Now let's export a post handler. So I'm gonna say export async function post. So if we look at our schema, we have a lot of defaults in here. And basically we only need to send the title to be able to create a new to-do. So let's go ahead and just grab that from the request body, just destructuring the title from the request.json. And then we can say, for example, if we don't have title, let's return a new response that says title is required with status 400. That's great. Okay, now we are ready to start putting stuff into our database using Prisma, but there's actually a caveat that we need to keep in mind. Expo API routes run in Cloudflare workers, meaning that it's a node environment with a lot of limitations. For example, we cannot access the file system in a worker. So because we are not allowed to use the file system on a Cloudflare worker, this is actually going to fail because Prisma is not going to find this .env file. But we can still use environment variables with Expo Router API routes. The only thing is that we need to use this .env.local, right? And get this variable using the process.env. So let's actually instantiate Prisma after we are sure that we have a title. So we can do basically this, just create a new Prisma client, but then I'm going to pass some options in here. And by the way, instead of bringing this Prisma client for this client age, I'm going to take this from my folder Prisma generated client /edge. So from here we take the client and then we can specify the data source URL. And finally from here we can access the process.env to pass the database URL directly here. So this should instantiate Prisma, and after this we can create our to-do. So I'm gonna say const to-do equal to await Prisma dot to-do, and here we have autocomplete because everything is fully typed with this really nice function create. We pass the data, which is just the title, and this is going to return the to-do. Everything is fully typed, and then we can return the response with the to-do, and we can also pass a status. In this case, 201 means that we created the record correctly. Okay, so this is how our to-do API with a post handler looks like. Now, we need to go to the app.json to make a small modification. On the output, instead of specifying static, I'm going to say server. Because we are using API routes, we need to make this modification under the web object in here. So let's go ahead and hit save. And this is the only change that we need to do to be able to use API routes. Now let's go to our application. I'm gonna go to the index screen, which is this screen that you can see here on the right. Okay, and I'm going to clear my screen just to have this hello Prisma text inside a safe area view. Now let's start the server. So I'm going to clear this and say npx expo start. If I reload the app, we're able to see the hello Prisma there, which means it's working great. Let's add a button from React Native, and the title is going to be create to do. And now let's create a function here. I'm going to say const handle create to do. This is going to be an async function. So let's say async. And from here, we can do a post request to our API. So let's grab the response and we can say await fetch. And then let's pass, in this case, I'm going to be using directly the local host. So it's going to be HTTP localhost 8081. And you can double check that in here. This is our server. And I'm missing the colon here. And then I'm going to say API / to do. Method is going to be post. And in the body, we need to pass the title. So that looks right. Right now, we are hard coding this to a new to do. We get the data from the response. Hopefully, this should be a new to do. So finally, in this onPress, I'm just going to call my handle create to do. And let's see what happens. I'm going to open my terminal just in case we have an error. I'm going to press the create to do. And we hit the API, as you can see. Okay, and after a moment, I get this new record, which means the new to do was created. Now I want to show you how this looks on the Prisma Data Explorer. So back to our Prisma project, I'm going to select the Studio tab here. And here you can see that we have the migrations. So I can come here and inspect the migrations that I have done to my database and select this table to do now with one record. And I can come here and quickly double check this and toggle. This UI, it's beautiful. I really like it and enjoy it. And it's very fast. So now I toggle this to be true. I can change it to be false. And it's super handy. We have the title here. Everything looks amazing. And just like that, at this moment, we have a full stack application technically. But let's keep working on the UI. So I'm going to wrap this in a view from React Native. And I'm going to add a flex of 1 with a padding of 16. Okay, cool. Then after this, I'm going to have a text input from React Native as well. And let's add a placeholder that says new to do. That works. Now we're gonna need some state to keep that title, right? So let's import use state from React. And then down here, when we change this text input, let's set the value to this variable. Okay. And then when we press the handle, when we call the handle create to do, instead of passing this hard-coded value, we can say title, or since these two properties have the same name, we can even just say title directly like this. And that should do it. Now my input is actually hard to see. Let's add a style. Let's say border width, yeah, border color gray, border radius. Not the best style, but yeah, I want this margin vertically. So let's say margin vertical, and now we have this nice spacing. Maybe let's increase the border radius and the padding to be 10, for example. And that looks a bit better. Okay, hello from iPhone 16 Pro. And press create to do. Let's check the terminal. And yeah, it's done. So if we go back here, we can maybe reload the page, and this is going to bring the latest data. So now we have the hello from iPhone 16 Pro. Awesome. Now let's see how we can fetch data from our database. Let's start by creating a use state variable that is going to contain a list of to-dos. The cool thing about using Prisma is that we have everything fully typed. So I can import this to-do from my client that was generated. So here we have the fully typed to-dos. And now we can set this basically each time that we create a new to-do, or when we load the screen for the first time using a use effect. So I'm going to import this use effect from React, and I want to run this on the first render on the screen. So that's why I'm passing this empty array here. And inside this use effect, yeah, let's create this function fetch to-dos, which is an async function. And this is going to hit our API to do. But in this case, this is a GET request because we are not specifying the method. By default, this is going to be a GET request. And if you remember, we don't have a GET handler yet, so we need to create that. Let's go back to our to-do API. And before this post, I'm going to export async function a gets, right? So again, we need to instantiate Prisma using our process.end database with Accelerate, and then just get the to-dos directly. And then you can pass more things to this find menu, for example. So you can say where, I don't know, title is equal to something, and you can do many operations. So just for this simple example, we are going to find everything that we can find and then just return that in an array of to-dos, just stringifying that with the status of 200. So let's hit save. Let's go back to our client. Now we are fetching and setting the to-dos here, meaning that we can render them down here. So after this, I'm going to create a view that iterates over each to-do and then renders the title. We are adding a key. Otherwise, we're going to get a warning from React because each item needs to be unique. So yeah, let's go ahead and hit save. And yeah, after a moment, we see the to-dos. So how awesome is that and how easy? And the best part is that everything is saved in the server. So we're just communicating with the backend over HTTP. We can create a very nice view for a to-do like this, for example, and then we can show more information. For example, we can show the ID, when the to-do was created at, and updated at, for example. I think that's all the data we have. Oh yeah, and I have a warning here because this is a date. So let's change this to be new date. And now this is going to show the date where the to-do was created, the title, and of course you can, improve the style. Let's see what cursor comes up with. Okay, and that's it. That's how it looks, guys. Let's add some spacing here. So I'm gonna say gap of 16. And there we have it. Now we are actually not using Accelerate yet. Now let's see how we can cache these queries that we are doing to our database using Accelerate. I want to show you this diagram that shows what we are doing right now. Basically, we have a client, which is our Expo application, an app server, which are our Expo API routes, and then we have the Accelerate node, right? This is with Accelerate actually, but without Accelerate, we're basically communicating directly from our server to our database, and this is increasing the response time. So let's use Accelerate to cache the queries that we're doing and return that to the client so that we don't hit the database each time. So back to our API, on the find many request, I want to cache this data, right? So that we don't hit the database each time, because we're not creating a new to-do each time that we reload, right? So we have in this case 2, and each time that I reload my application, I'm hitting the database instead of caching this data. So we can actually specify here an object with the cache strategy, and we can pass more options. For example, the SWR, the tags, and TTL. So SWR means stale while revalidate, and basically defines a number of seconds that accelerate my served stale cache data while new data is fetched in the background. TTL means time to live, and you can also think about it like the time that this data is considered fresh. So let's say that your users create a new to-do each day. So you could say that TTL is going to be a day, right? But I would say TTL should be 60 seconds. I think for a to-do application, that's more than enough. And you can, of course, play around this according to your needs. And then this stale while revalidate means that we are going to also keep using this cache data after it has basically expired, but we're going to use it for 60 seconds while we refresh the data or while we refresh the cache with new data. This is great to reduce latency by accessing the data while still maintaining a more up-to-date value in the Accelerate cache. So just like that, we should be able to have a better performance. So let's see if we can note a difference just by refreshing. Okay, so we have the two to-dos. And if I refresh, you can see that now it's instant. It's like it was, I don't know, saved locally. But let's try to create a new to-do. So let's run this test to-do and create to-do. Okay, to-do was created. Let's refresh the application. And I can still see 2 records. This is because we are getting the data. So if I keep refreshing, I eventually should, the data should eventually be the new data. Okay, and after a moment, after keeping refreshing my application, I'm able to see 3 records. So as you notice, maybe you want to, have your data right away, or just use the cache, and this should work just fine as well. It really depends on your application. Now I want to show you guys how this looks on the Prisma data platform. They also have this really nice dashboard for Accelerate, so we can view the insights of the caching that we are doing in our application. I can see the total queries, the average response size, the total egress, and the cache hit rate. So 90% of my requests are cached, which is great. They feel super fast. Okay, so we are able to create stuff, read stuff. I think we're in a solid point to deploy this to production and see this in action. So to deploy this to production, first of all, let's export. So for this simple example, I don't want to deploy my website, only my API. So I'm going to pass this flag no SSG and hit enter. This is going to export only my APIs. So in this case, only Todo. Here we have the summary, just this Todo app. Now let's deploy this API using EAS. I'm gonna say EAS deploy prod. By the way, if you don't have the EAS CLI, you can install it globally on your machine by running npm install globally EAS CLI. So after you run this command, you should be able to see the EAS version that you're using. So in this case, I'm using 16.4. And yeah, so I can run now this command EAS deployed prod and hit enter. Now this is going to ask me to create a new project on EAS. This is why you need to have an Expo account, and also you need to log in using EAS login. After you log in, you should be able to run this command, and yeah, it's going to ask you to create a new project. So I'm gonna say yes, and once my project is created, it's going to tell me, okay, let's go ahead and deploy your project. This is going to be your URL. In this case, it's Expo Prisma Todo app.expo.app, and I get this domain for free. And by the way, instead of using this hard-coded localhost, I can now use HTTPS, which is awesome. Let me go ahead and get rid of this space, and this should be now my deployed endpoint. So I'm going to take this here and hit enter, and this is going to create my deployment. And after 1 second, my API is deployed, meaning that I can use this API in production. So if I start my project again, if you notice now we are connected to the deployed one, only for create to do, right? But let's go ahead and use the same for fetching data. So let's copy this and paste it in here. Okay, and hit save. And I'm going to refresh the application. Okay, and if we give it a second, now we see data, but this is now fetching data from production. And if I refresh, the data is cached and it's there right away. So how cool is that? If we now go to the Expo dashboard, I can see my Expo Prisma Todo application, and on the left, I can scroll to hosting and see the overview of what's going on with my deployment. So if I refresh, you can see that now I have 3 requests that I've made to my API to do. And we have more information like where this request came from. So in this case, the United States. And we can also inspect more in detail each request. And you can see the status 200, you can select it, see more stuff. And I didn't provide any logs on my API, but if you want to log information, you should be able to see the logs in here as well. Let's talk a little bit about security. Of course, right now our Todo app is exposed to everyone, but I want to show you an example of an application that I'm working on. So this application, guys, it's actually a side project that I'm working on. And by the way, the code is available for all the pro members at codewithbeto.dev in case you're curious about this and you want to learn more. But I want to talk a little bit about security, right? Because right now our API, our Todo API, it's available to everyone. We don't have any kind of authentication or protection that we can do. And I want to show you how I'm leveraging Prisma with Expo Router API routes to build this application for scheduling posts. So let me show you how this looks. I'm going to sign in with Google. These are some of the posts that I've made through this application. So this application allows me to connect social accounts. So right now I have LinkedIn, X, and everything is working with Prisma. The only thing that I'm doing is wrapping all my APIs with authentication. This authentication is kind of like a middleware that is just checking that each request has a token, a JWT token, and then based on that, we can reject or approve the access to this API, which means everything that you see here, for example, to get this protected data, it's protected for authentication as well. And it's not super trivial to integrate, but I just wanted to mention that, of course, be careful. You don't want to just ship this to production without any authentication. But anyways, if you're curious about this code base and how it's going to be evolving, consider becoming a pro member at codewithbeto.dev. I'm super excited for Prisma, Prisma Studio, Prisma Accelerate, fully managed Postgres database. So everything that you need to have the state that your application needs is now available to you completely for free. And deploying your APIs with Expo is now easier than ever. So make sure to give Prisma a try. I'm pretty sure you won't regret it. That's it for this quick video, guys. I hope you like it. I hope you learned something new. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.